Are police required to read Miranda rights to people when they make an arrest? That's a very common question, and if you watch to the end of the video, you're going to find the answer. But first, I want to talk about preparation and planning for traffic stops, what you should do when stopped by the police. Remember, the police in this country have a lot of power and authority over our movements once we're out in public. They can restrain our liberty, they can pull us over, they can pull us out of the car, they can question us, they can make a decision to arrest, they can even make a decision to charge. And they can charge you with anything from a very small crime to the most serious of crimes. So that kind of power and authority can turn from a minor inconvenience that you drive away from into a major personal emergency where you may not even be able to make bail and you're facing serious criminal charges. Now, we know from experience with other types of emergencies that a little preparation and planning can go a very long way towards improving our outcomes. That's why we have CPR training. That's why we're taught to stop, drop, and roll. That's why we have tornado drills, fire drills. So let's talk about ways to improve your outcome in a traffic stop. If you're a driver, it's a special situation because you have to give your driver's license to an officer upon request. That's part of your driving contract. And so that's a different situation being a driver. They will use that to identify you. But if you're either not a driver, you're a passenger, or you're not even in a car, you're on a sidewalk, a city street, in front of a house, in a yard, in a store. In Texas, you really don't have to identify yourself unless you're arrested. And you don't have to be a jerk to assert your rights. If you try to bow up and take a stand and are obnoxious about it, you can get harsher treatment back from the police officers, whether they're right or wrong. Sometimes you just have to decide, is this the hill I want to die on? Some people, when taking a stand, escalate things, and traffic stops can end with somebody not walking away. So it is a serious thing to get stopped by the police. It can go from nothing to 1,000 miles an hour faster than you imagine. Let's get back to traffic stops. The number one thing you can do to improve your outcome is try to make the officer comfortable regarding their safety during their encounter with you. They generally don't know what type of situation they're walking up into. They're going to be alert and on guard, and you can dial that down some by the things you do. So that would include pulling over promptly and safely, responding to their directions, if any, in that regard. It includes not making any sudden moves or strange movements inside the car, either when they're following you or as they're approaching the car. And it includes being considerate of what they can and can't see by turning on your dome light if it's at nighttime, or rolling down one or more windows if it's warm enough and allowing them to see, and putting your hands on the steering wheel. Some people will turn off the engine so they don't think, hey, this person might pull off if I stand by the car. Now, I had one client say that I'm going to take the keys out of the ignition and throw them onto the pavement beside the car so they'll know I'm not going to run. And that's kind of an example of going overboard. That kind of puts you in felony stop territory where they think, oh, this person knows he's a threat, has been in this situation before. Maybe I need to be more careful. Don't go overboard. Situational awareness is always incredibly important. And I think any law enforcement situation should be considered worthy of taking care with your behavior. Now, if you're just trying to get out of a ticket with a warning, doing something like admitting you were speeding and asking for a break might be the best way to do that. I've done that successfully. I know other people have. On the other hand, if you've had a beer or two, talking about something like that could just give the officer more opportunity to think your speech is slurred. So you might want to just quietly try to take the speeding ticket or whatever the offense is. Keep yourself from being investigated for a DWI. You don't have any obligation to speak and answer questions. Just if you have contraband in the car, whether that's something little or something major, maybe you've got something you shouldn't have, and you want to think about how to tailor your approach in advance so that you can possibly have a better outcome. Also, please, if you know the officer has decided to arrest you, my best advice is to comply with the arrest. I'm sure I'm not the only attorney in town or across the country who's had multiple clients who make every one of their arrests worse by running. Maybe they're going to get charged with one thing and they run, resist, and fight. It's not the recommended approach. It just makes your situation worse. Now, here's where we're going to talk about Miranda rights. I know that TV and movies make it seem like they have to do that every time they arrest you, and some departments probably do just because they don't ever want to miss, and it's kind of a matter of professionalism. But other police departments know that they don't really need to do that every arrest, and they don't really want to go to that extra step. They're in a hurry. It's just completely unnecessary. So it doesn't mean you can invalidate your arrest. It doesn't mean you can beat your charge if they didn't read your rights. It just means that if they decide later on to ask you questions once you've been arrested, if they haven't read your rights, they may lose the right to use your answers in court against you. So they don't want to take that risk. They'll read you your rights. If they don't read you your rights, they could lose the evidence. Now, if you sit there in the back of the car on the in-car video and say, hey, you didn't read me my rights. I know my rights. I have the right to remain silent. Anything I say can and will be used against me in a court of law. I have the right to an attorney if I cannot. And you just go through the whole thing. Well, then you've just demonstrated that you know your rights. They really didn't need to read them to you anyway. You already knew them. So there's a lot of things like that in the law you can trip over. It's important not to get too cocky about what you know, what you think. You may be wrong. There's lots of reasons to remain silent, and that's especially true as charges become more and more serious. But let's start with simple situations like getting pulled over for a traffic ticket. If the officer asks you where you're going and you decide to tell a little fib, some officers are really good at picking out inconsistencies immediately. The thing is, it ramps up suspicion and it might degrade your outcome. It would be far better to say, officer, with all due respect, I've got an attorney friend who says I should never, ever answer questions, so I'm going to respectfully decline. If you don't bow up or make a big deal out of it, there's a good chance they'll appreciate the professionalism of your response and move on. You know, they know they kind of have to in most cases. Some officers don't get the clue and they'll do things incorrectly. But the other thing that causes is if they're going to get any suspicion or probable cause against you, they'll have to get it somewhere other than straight out of your mouth. Your mouth makes their job so much easier. Now, also, if you've been polite and cooperative, if you've put them at ease when they're walking up to the car, they might even suspect that the reason you know these things to do and that you know how to behave is because you've got family in law enforcement. So that establishes the possibility that you've got common ground with them. But that does two things. It generates a little bit of goodwill and it establishes that possible common ground. And those two things can put you much closer to the path of driving away with either a warning or just a traffic ticket, as opposed to being put in the back of a car and taken to the jail. Now, sometimes getting a traffic ticket is a win. With regard to intoxication suspicion or them requesting that you get out of the car, you have to get out of the car when asked. But with regard to intoxication, don't presume that they're always going to be able to smell alcohol on your breath and suspect intoxication just because of the circumstances. Don't let that cause you to admit to drinking because you think it makes you more credible. They hear that all the time. It just makes their job so much easier. This would be a good time to use your right to remain silent. If you admit to any amount of alcohol, they're going to get you out and do those difficult tests that look a lot easier than they are, especially because they don't tell you everything you're graded on. They're like carnival games. They're deceptive games, and if you miss one thing, even as an innocent mistake because you didn't understand, now you can only miss one thing more before you fail on some of these tests. And you don't want to fail a sobriety test because then you're going to go to jail. If they feel that they have enough to swear out a warrant for your breath or your blood, they're going to get a judge to order that, and then you're going to have to give your blood. So again, don't resist, don't fight. It's just part of what will have to be done. You're choosing to remain silent and not agreeing to the tests make their job harder. Then they have to get that warrant, and they may not be able to. They may decide that they don't have enough. Whereas if you had said you'd been drinking, they have enough because of you. So consider all these things. Watch this video a couple of times if you need to shore up your understanding of all this. And if you like this video, hit the like button any odd number of times. And feel free to subscribe and check out more of my videos.